For nearly a decade, CM Punk became the biggest topic of conversation amongst wrestling fans. In January 2014, he walked out of WWE before very publicly airing his grievances and bashing the company.
A lot of things I want to get off my chest.
And despite being a world champion, despite being one of the best wrestlers on the roster, and despite being one of the best talkers in company history, CM Punk was still treated as second place to WWE's hand-picked superstars like John Cena. He became a figurehead for the ever-growing anti-WWE crowd, and that would continue to join him over the years in both bashing the company and leaving it behind them entirely. Since the closing of WCW, the fans wanted to see change in the WWE, and CM Punk was the guy to facilitate that change within the company. However, in 2019, the fans of professional wrestling would rejoice as a new company would start to emerge. A company that would breathe new life into the industry, one that showcased that change that fans have been clamoring for almost 2 decades. With global stars like Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and more all being used as the backbone of this new promotion, the wrestling world would be completely changed with the formation of All Elite Wrestling. So when AEW opened its doors to revolutionize pro wrestling, it was only natural for CM Punk to arrive. The man who arguably started the revolution in 2011 with his legendary pipebomb promo arrived in AEW and has left a reputation that is as fascinating as it is heartbreaking. While he was a celebrated hero for many fans, his actions near the end of his current run with the company would prove to be disastrous for both himself and this new company, but we'll get into that later. For now, this is Grisha from Wrestleology, and let us take a look back at CM Punk's time in AEW, where this hero of pro wrestling lived long enough to see himself become the villain. On August 20th, 2021, AEW announced that it would be holding a special episode of their weekly show Rampage in Chicago, Illinois. It was hyped as a massive show, with reports leaking out that CM Punk would arrive in the company. For the first time in 7 years, Punk would walk down the ramp and into the ring, with fans literally crying at the sight of the Second City Saint. What followed was a passionate promo as Punk would address all the controversy around him. He talked about why he left WWE, he talked about his future in AEW, and he did it all with an air of vulnerability. This wasn't a pro wrestling promo where a man was screaming his frustrations. This was a man humbly walking back into a job he left 7 years ago, only to find himself walking into the open arms of millions. It was a moving experience. That first half hour of Rampage. Goosebumps, tears, and love surrounded CM Punk that night. However, despite all the emotions, this is still pro wrestling, and Punk would go on to announce that his first match back would be at the upcoming All Out pay-per-view, and it would be against none other than the AEW original Darby Allin. The face-painted Daredevil quickly won the hearts of fans upon arrival with his cool look and Daredevil stunts, so Punk would give him the spotlight in what was an emotional and intense match between the two, and in the end, Punk would counter a reverse Hurricane Rana to make Allin go to sleep. Following this, Punk would enter a heated feud with Eddie Kingston. Kingston, another overlooked talent throughout his entire career, had a real-life hatred for Punk that would fuel them throughout their feud going into full gear. So when these two wizards on the mic clashed with all of this real-life animosity to work with, you just knew that magic would happen. They would continuously steal the show with their promos leading into the event before finally clashing, with CM Punk able to once again secure a victory in AEW. However, while Kingston and Punk had a feud that felt very real and personal, it was nothing when compared to Punk's epic drama that would follow. On an episode of Dynamite in November of 2021, MJF decided to walk down the ramp and cut one of his typical heel promos. However, while talking about how great he is as a performer, one CM Punk would interrupt him and the feud would start. It's the best in the world versus the man who is better than you, and you know it. Following an epic segment with both men using their verbal daggers to cut each other as deep as possible, the two would finally compete in one of the best TV matches of the year, and in that match, Punk would suffer his first loss in AEW to the young upstart. But this heated rivalry would continue into the next year as they geared up for a violent dog collar match at Revolution in March. But this rivalry on its way to that pay-per-view would only prove to be more and more personal. MJF would describe his journey as a young fan who looked up to Punk, and while he shared his love for him as a performer, he would go on to describe what a lot of fans felt back in 2014 when he left. He talked about feeling betrayed with his hero CM Punk walking out of WWE and on him. But MJF is a heel, and a vicious one at that, and right before Revolution, he would violently attack Punk, causing blood to pour down his face. MJF would then describe himself as the devil.
I am the devil himself,
mimicking a famous promo that Punk made back in his Ring of Honor days, and this nickname would actually linger around MJF as he can be seen now as the most hated man in AEW today, ruling over the World Championship as the devil of All Elite Wrestling. However, Punk proved that not even the devil could escape punishment, as he would get his revenge by defeating MJF at Revolution. Of course, Punk has to give the assist to Wardlow, who would finally turn his back on MJF in this match, giving Punk MJF's Dynamite Diamond ring to use as a weapon against Wardlow's now former boss, and this match was absolutely insane. I was actually in attendance for this match, and it's definitely one of my favorite matches I've ever seen live. There were so many layers, so many twists and turns for this feud that it could have its own dedicated video to it. But for now, we'll continue on with Punk's time in AEW now that he has beaten MJF, and the momentum given to Punk for that victory would launch him into a program with the AEW World Heavyweight Champion Hangman Adam Page. And while the build wasn't really anything to write home about, it was still exciting for many fans, as they were two of the biggest wrestlers in the entire company. Page, the homegrown champion, versus Punk, the outside legend looking for one more reign. And at Double or Nothing, Punk's AEW career would peak as he won the AEW World Championship. For many fans, this was a blessing, but in hindsight, this victory would become the beginning of the end for the Second City Saint. Just 5 days removed from his massive title victory, Punk was forced to announce that he wouldn't be able to defend it due to an injury suffered in the match. He would remain champion though, with AEW opting to crown an interim champion until Punk was cleared for action. And in his absence, it would be Jon Moxley who would win the interim title at the Forbidden Door event. Moxley would continue to defend the title, putting on tremendous matches on AEW TV until Punk would make his return. And that he did, because on the August 10th edition of Dynamite, Punk made his return to TV to immediately challenge Moxley for a match at All Out. However, what ended up happening was rather strange, both in the moment and in hindsight. In the build up to the event, it was announced that their match to crown the definitive world champion would take place on just another episode of Dynamite. This was a huge match between two world champions, two of the biggest stars in the company, and they had it on an episode of Dynamite. And that's not even the end of the weirdness, since in the match, Moxley just beat Punk in a few minutes in what essentially was a squash match. A couple of elbows, a few forearms, two paradigm shifts, and Moxley was the new champion. Fans were left shocked that Punk would lose so quickly and in such dominating fashion. The following week though, even Mox knew that the match could have been better, so he issued a rematch for All Out, which Punk accepted. And at All Out, Punk came back strong with a victory to recapture the gold. But now this is when we get to the real meat of this drama, the moment the hero turned into the villain. After the All Out event, Punk made an appearance in the post-show media scrum. What people saw from this appearance was truly unexpected of the brand new champion. He would start criticizing the company, more specifically the Elite, who he would call irresponsible in their positions as the EVPs of AEW. He would talk about his tense past with Colt Cabana, denying rumors about his potential influences over Colt's time in the company, and all of this happened while Punk sat next to the owner of AEW in Tony Khan, who would physically show his disapproval of Punk in the moment. The CM Punk who walked into the company just 1 year ago as this leader of the revolution was now once again bashing the company he worked for. However, while Punk may have had his issues with WWE that felt reasonable, his complaints in AEW felt more childish than anything else. He brought these private issues into the public eye, and it was both unfair and unprofessional to do that. And that's not even mentioning what happened afterwards. According to reports, the Elite approached Punk about the media scrum incident, and when confronted, a massive legitimate fight broke out backstage. Punk, his friend Ace Steel, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega were all a part of a huge fight that left everyone involved looking worse for being part of such a disaster. The following Dynamite, Tony Khan would announce that both the AEW World Championship and the Elite's newly won Trios titles had been vacated and new champions would be crowned in the weeks to come. And after this disgusting display of unprofessionalism, Punk hasn't been seen since. While this is probably because of a torn muscle Punk suffered during the all-out match with Mox, you still have to wonder if we will ever see him again following the incident. And to me, that's such a shame to say, because Punk is by far my favorite wrestler of all time. When Punk first entered AEW, it was the biggest news story in pro wrestling since the announcement of AEW itself. And ever since leaving the industry, crowds would continuously beg for him to come back, constantly chanting his name in his absence. So when he finally returned, the fans rejoiced. Their hero, their wrestling messiah, was back, and in his time in AEW, Punk has put on some of the most captivating stories in wrestling history. His return with Darby Allin had fans in tears of happiness, his feud with Eddie Kingston saw some of the rawest promos in AEW history, and his epic war with MJF is still talked about as the best wrestling rivalry in decades. But in the span of a couple of weeks, CM Punk's reputation would just absolutely tank. Punk has always been a controversial figure, that's nothing new. Usually we would see him use that rebellious attitude to try and provide a different side of pro wrestling. He was a renegade in WWE, always going out to the ring and speaking the truth to power. But that fire within him has become more destructive than it has a fuel source for evolution. Punk will always be a big name in wrestling, for good and for bad, but now with his time in AEW seemingly in limbo, one must wonder what's next for the self-proclaimed best in the world. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to go ahead, drop a like on it, and don't forget to subscribe to not miss the next one. Join the Discord, and thank you so much for watching.